Hello, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Well, our look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2 now continues on with the episode Rules of Acquisition. In Quarks, a group of Ferengi are playing a late-night game of Tongo, as is Lieutenant Jadzia Dax. She informs Quark and his friends that Curzon used to play the game, but she's a better player than Curzon ever was. One of the new waiters, Pel, makes a profitable suggestion to Quark during the game and introduces him to Sandpeas, which he says Quark can use to double beverage profits. While Rom is threatened, Quark is impressed, but before the conversation can continue, an alarm goes off to indicate a subspace communication on Grand Nagus 6 personal channel. The Nagus offers Quark the chance to make more profit than you ever dreamed of. All he has to do is earn it. Zek is seated in Commander Sisko's office, accompanied by his Hyperion servant, Myhardu. Zek offers Hyperion beetle snuff to Sisko Major Kira, but they both decline. Zek announces that he has made contact with a species from the Gamma Quadrant called the Dosi and plans to hold a business meeting with them aboard Deep Space Nine. But Sisko and Major Kira warn Zek not to cheat their guests. As a goodwill gesture, Zek attempts to make another deal by selling Bajor 50,000 kilos of brazine nitrate, something Bajor could very well use at a reduced rate. With the purpose, Sisko suggests making a gift instead, and Zek then compliments his negotiating skills and agrees. Hardu at his side and Quark at his feet taking his shoes off, Zek explains that tulip berries and tulip berry wine are the secret to the Gamma Quadrant. He claims they will help the Ferengi Alliance get its foot in the Gamma Quadrant, making it the greatest deal in Ferengi history. Quark instantly takes to the idea. However, when Quark goes back to the bar and tells his brother Rom about the new proposal, Pel quotes from the Rules of Acquisition: "The bigger the smile, the sharper the knife." The young waiter seems to think Zek is setting Quark up in case the deal falls through. Over Rom's objections, Quark takes Pel on as his assistant for negotiations for 20% of the profits. He sends Rom to serve tables instead. Pel is pleased with the outcome and, back in his quarters, removes a pair of synthetic lobes. Ferengi females have smaller lobes than males, and uniform, revealing Pel is actually female. Bum bum bum. The Dosi turn out to be an extremely aggressive people. On first contact with station crew and the Ferengi delegation, the first thing they see is one of the Dosi thrown onto the station during a minor disagreement that occurred between themselves just prior. At the meeting, two Dosi named Inglatu and Zairi, Quark, with Pel by his side, opens the deal by buying 10,000 vats of wine with some equipment. However, the Dosi are insulted they are not talking to Zek himself, and offer 5,000 vats instead. Pel helps Quark empathize the deal and the fact that Zek wanted Quark to represent him. And Glatu eventually says he'll think about the 10,000 vats. Meanwhile, Myhardu silently presents Kira with a gift from Zek and Ops. He leaves before she realizes what it is and refuses, but Dax says it's nice. Dax has a kinder opinion of Ferengi than Kira does, and Kira makes it known she doesn't understand why. Dax says she actually enjoys herself around Ferengi more than any other race, thinking through her past lifetimes, even though she admits her primitive attitude toward women and extreme focus on profit. However, she notes that once one accepts this, the species can be quite enjoyable to be around. As another night of Tongo, now with Zek playing. There is more of the typical jostling, but Zek challenges Quark on the deal. Quark doesn't mention he has, so far, failed to acquire the 10,000 vats of wine that Zek requested, but before he could tell him the bad news, the Nagus decides he wants 100,000 vats instead. While Quark seems to believe this is impossible, Pel compliments Zek on his decision, since it will let them know they mean business. Quietly, Pel now reason to suspect he wants negotiations to fail. Away from the table to get Zek more tube grubs, Pel encourages Quark with complete loyalty and faith in him. Quark is glad to meet such a partner. After the game, Dax meets up with Pel at the Replimat. She's observed there's something different about Pel from other Ferengi. For example, the loyalty shown to Quark. Dax admits that in a certain way, she kind of loves Quark, and Pel does too. Dax pushes that observation, and the Pell admits she's actually female and for Dax to keep her voice down. Quark arrives and brings Pell for negotiations, leaving Dax to ponder Pell's situation. Zek is having a drink on the upper level of the promenade, looking at women walking by with Ardu. Kira comes to return his gift, though first he supposes she wants to thank him for the nitrate. Also refusing his offer of a night of wild, passionate romance, she hands him the gift and leaves, but not before getting a tap on her rear again. Quark and Pell take her place, reporting that the Dosi have left without signing the contract. Just as Zek erupts at Quark for the failure, though, Pell intervenes, and obviously planning to take the Negas's ship to the Gamma Quadrant and pursue the Dosi. Quark follows the lead and says he'll pilot the ship. On the way to the Gamma Quadrant, Quark wonders aloud why Zek insisted on so many vats, and the possibility that he is purposefully sabotaging the deal. Pell doesn't think so, but that's why Zek knows more than he is letting on. Quark is glad to have Pell as his consultant, which makes Pell quite happy. Pell tries to say something to him, but Quark interjects, thinking Pell wants more than 20% of the profits, but he will not change that arrangement. Meanwhile, Rom is sitting in the bar and is becoming frustrated about Pell's partnership with him. Odo comes to him to inquire about Quark's whereabouts, but Rom doesn't know. After a quick exchange about not letting someone come between family, Rom gets the idea to go to Pell's quarters. He turns it upside down and eventually finds the synthetic lobes. He's then realizing Pell is actually female and at the same time pleased now he has something to use against her. Uh-oh. Quark and Pell reach the Dusty homeworld and travel to some common area, finding several acts of brawls, deals and disagreements among the various inhabitants. Zuri finds them and explains that the Dosi are very serious about profit. They find it glad to, and Quark reiterates his demand for 100,000 vats of Tulaberry wine. And Gladu continues to refuse until Quark declares that he does not plan to leave, and even overturns a barrel of some drink. He agrees to 10,000, but says 100,000 is impossible and leaves. Quark and Pell stay the night and obtain quarters. Now, Pell is very anxious about sleeping alone next to Quark and tries to get out of it. Quark gets exhausted and wants to be near Gladu in case he changes his mind. Pell stalls with the Corsatork, but then falls into it and kisses Quark, obviously having fallen in love with him. Just then, Zuri comes to them and reveals that neither Inglatu nor herself nor any Dosi can sell the Ferengi 100,000 vats of wine. Instead, she offers to put them in touch with the Karema, an important member of something called the Dominion, for a price. Ooh, foreshadowing! Finally, Quark and Pell realize the plan was not to buy wine but to get in contact with the Dominion. At the same time, Quark decides to forget about Pell's attempt to kiss him. They return to Deep Space Nine, having bought no wine but with contact information about the Karema. Zek is very pleased and gives Quark a percentage of any future deals with them. Rom tries to interrupt with his newfound discoveries about Pell. After leaving Zek, he reveals the secret to Quark. His brother declares that it must remain a secret, as females are not allowed to earn profit, and associating with a female like Pell will land him in prison. He paints near the Dabo table from the possible consequences. Waking up in the infirmary, Quark makes sure Rom hasn't told anyone about Pell, says it must be kept a secret. Rom wants to tell Zek, but Quark convinces him not to. He then goes to Pell and tells her to leave the stage before he gets implicated in doing business with the female. Pell has other ideas about the secret. During dinner with Zek, Rom and Quark, Pell barges in. She confronts the Negas and reveals her true identity, to Quark and Rom's amazement. A clothed female discusses Zek, and he threatens Quark with imprisonment until he realizes that he was represented by Pell as well. Zek allows Quark to go free so long as the secret remains secret, but it will cost Quark his Gamma Quadrant profits. Ultimately, Quark and Pell share a heartfelt goodbye, but Quark decides not to go with her when she leaves the station to start a new life. Quark finds Dax sitting at the bar and offers another game of Tango, but Dax responds that Quark has lost enough today, referring to Pell. He feigns ignorance, but Dax says she knows him enough to know he misses her. She leaves, and Quark begins to lament his lost opportunities in both business and love. Poor Quark. So anyway, let's take a look at some background information about this episode, beginning with story and script. This episode was originally to be titled Profit Margin. It began life as a TNG pitch. Hillary J. Batter's original story had Pell involved with Will Riker. Beverly Crusher would subsequently find out, and she and Pell would develop a kind of sisterhood. In the Birth of the Dominion and Beyond documentary on the DS9 Season 3 DVD, several of the writers give their views on the need to create a specific identity for the Gamma Quadrant. Micah Pillar, quote, I can remember that once we decided that we were going to go deeply into the wormhole, that we essentially were forcing ourselves to decide for ourselves what we were going to find there. Ira Stephen Bear, quote, we just felt that having done a year and a half of the show at the time, that we had such a rich backdrop that we hadn't yet explored. What's on the other side of the wormhole? Is it just more space? Robert Hewitt Wolf, quote, we just felt it was time to give a face to the Gamma Quadrant. Voyager was going to be wandering through the Delta Quadrant from place to place, meeting new people every week, and we wanted to make the Gamma Quadrant distinctly different from that, by creating the Dominion, a sort of unifying anti-Federation in a way, just to give it a completely different character. Of the creation of the Dominion, which at this stage was simply a name as the writers hadn't developed any definite plans yet, Ira Bear notes, quote, the existence of the Gamma Quadrant next door to Deep Space Nine would not help the series if it just remained unexplored space. They did 3 years of that on the original series, and 7 years on the Next Generation. We needed to define that space. Now let's take a look about something about the production. Makeup designer Michael Westmore based the facial hair of the Dosi on colorations found in the tribes of Borneo and the South Seas. Interesting. And now, finally, on to some trivia. This is the first episode to mention the Dominion. The Karema are also mentioned for the first time. The decision to locate the initial mention of the Dominion in an otherwise inconsequential comedy episode was one of which was very purposely taken by the writers to throw the viewers off. Of course, the Dominion will go on to be very important, in contrast to their inauspicious introduction in this episode. Reference rules of acquisition. Number 21, never place friendship above profit. 22, a wise man can hear profit in the wind. 33, it never hurts to suck up to the boss. 48, the bigger the smile, the sharper the knife. 59, free advice is seldom cheap. 62, the riskier the road, the greater the profit. And number 103, sleep can interfere with ... This episode marks the first time we see the game of Chongo being played. This episode marks the first on-screen appearance of a Ferengi female in Star Trek. Apart from Pell, only one other female Ferengi is ever portrayed in an episode DS9, namely Quark and Rom's mother, Ishka. It is also the first Star Trek episode where a character is cross-dressing for most of the episode. Quark himself would temporarily cross-dress as a woman in Profit and Lace. No stardate is given in this episode, but it obviously precedes the next episode, Necessary Evil, stardate 47282.5. In that episode, Rom references the time Quark stayed in the Gamma Quadrant overnight. Among the items from this sale, which were sold off on the It's a Wrap sale and auction on eBay, was Brian Thompson's costume. A couple of pamphlets are seen in the background of some scenes on the promenade, including that in which Odo is talking to Rom in the bar. During the first television of this broadcast, the title was misspelled. Rules of Acquisition spelled Aquisition. It was fixed by the time the episode reran later in the season. On the Bridges X ship, there is a dome in the background that appears to be the lower half of the Thoughtmaker from the battle. This episode hints at general acceptance of homosexuality in the 21st century. When Pell confesses her love for Quark to Dax, Dax is perfectly at ease with it even though she believes Pell to be a man. It was only later that she learns her astonishment that Pell is a woman. Carol Golofton, who plays Jake Sisko, does not appear in this episode. So overall, I think it's a pretty darn good episode, and I like the fact that it tells us a little bit more about Ferengi society and stuff like that. So, yeah. So overall, I give Rules of Acquisition 4 warp cores out of 5. Well, tune in a bit so we take a look at the next episode, Necessary Evil. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.